High above 3733 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And oftentimes I connect with rhythmists through new media, and they don't necessarily know always where I'm coming from. But over time, I learn about their trajectory and their career and their philosophy as it relates to playing in time and space. And then they see the kind of work that I've been doing as well, trying to connect the lineage of all musics to future generations' understanding of how real music is made. I get a chance today to talk to really one of my favorite drummers, a guy who sort of loves to lie below the surface, but he's always cooking the groove and he's always playing melodically. And he can play a great shuffle, too, on top of that. And he's played with a bunch of luminary cats. Without further ado, Ronnie Beck, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake, how's it going? All right.
Hey, man. Hey, so you just got were you gigging on the road, or you just got back into town from something else?
Yeah, it's, kind of sorry to say it. I have some kind of bad news, man. I really don't want to talk about it.
No problem. No, we're not going to. I wasn't sure. Don't worry about it. Here's the thing. What I do want to talk about, Ronnie. All I hear today when I go here. Or I don't want to paint with a totally broad brush, but I just wanted you to talk about an experience you had. Could have been with John Lee, or could have been with any of the old school cats, guys that played blues, R&B, and jazz. Were you, when you were on the bandstand, they'd look back and you say, "Hey Beck, no backbeat, no backbeat." They didn't want backbeat. All right, the jazzers hated backbeat, and I wanted to know. If you had, and a lot of the cats I talked to, they'd get that kind of message, and I was wondering if you could talk about that, because all I hear today in a lot of modern music is backbeat, and I wanted to know how you broke out of that.
Well, I kind of came up in the jazz thing, and I had already known, because I'm talking to other drummers, that you didn't play a backbeat, so I never got that much because I already knew. I will say I played with Barney Kessel one time, and he didn't like the drummers to play a lot, so all he said to me was, "Don't feed me so much."
Don't feed. What did he say? Don't feed me.
Don't feed me so much. In other words, don't get too busy back there. He just wanted. He liked it. Like if you were gonna play a backbeat, it better be a side stick. Because he didn't want to hear a lot of stuff on the drums. That's what he meant. Don't feed me so much.
Let me ask you though. Could you talk about a conversation you had with one of your mentors or peers when you got the message that cats on the bandstand? I mean, you were marinating in that East Bay. Well, I mean, you can break it down, but it seemed like you were doing the San Jose thing, you were doing the East Bay thing, you were doing the San Francisco thing. So, could you talk about a conversation you had when you realized that the cats up there, whether it was John Lee or could have been anybody, but they didn't want backbeat?
You talking about the backbeat?
Well, you said that you had already knew by the time you got up on the bandstand that they didn't want that because you had conversations with people. And I was wondering if you could talk about one of those conversations, who it was with, and, one of your mentors, because you came up, playing jazz.
Well, yeah, man. I came up, actually, people attribute my style of playing a lot to Oakland because I kind of hung out in Oakland back in the day. But really, I'm from the Midwest, Omaha, Nebraska, man. And there was a lot of good music that came through Omaha, Nebraska, believe it or not, because it was kind of a crossroads between Chicago and Denver, or Kansas City and Minneapolis. So a lot of good players came through Omaha, Nebraska on the Chitlin circuit, and it was just understood. I mentor, and I guess I could say a guy that's not really well known, a cat named Curly Martin, used to tell me, "Man, you don't play a backbeat on jazz."
I've interviewed Curly, man. I love Curly, man. He's such a great player.
Yeah, Curly's a great guy, man, and he just want to kind of explain that to me. And again, I never really had it in a problem with that in a live setting, because I learned that as a teenager, so it was never an issue when I did anything. Whereas when I played with John Lee Hooker, play whatever, because his music was different. Matter of fact, it was in 1971 that I played with him down in L.A. And I was just hanging out, and he looked at me and said, "Boy, what you play?" I said, "I'm a drummer." And he said, "You want to play?" And I said, "Yeah." So I played on a couple of John. Really, it was just like that. And I got to play on a couple of John Lee Hooker records. In fact, you just opened the show with John Lee Hooker. Wasn't that John Lee?
That was you. That was let's see. Let's go back here for a second. The name of the tune was "Country Boy," and that album was called "I Never Get Out of These Blues Alive" with Ronnie Beck on drums.
Yeah,
and that's a great.
Yeah, I played it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I hadn't heard that in a long time.
Oh man,
wow.
this is cooking, man. And then you do he pulls out a cover version of TB Sheets from Van Morrison, which is badass. It's so great, man. But I mean,
Okay.
I mean, this is important. I'm 39 years old. I've been on this trip for 6 years, and I've talked to, so many rhythmists. And what I'm really learning, what I'm really figuring out here, because we're going to hit that Oklahoma scene. I know that. I mean, did you know Calvin Keys back then or no?
Calvin Keys learned how to play from my mom. She learned jazz playing with my mom.
Well,
she used to come over to my house when I was a kid.
All right, but how old were you when he was a kid?
Well, Calvin's only about 10 years. He's not even 10 years older than me. But I guess I was maybe 13 or 14, and he would come by, and he and my mom would, because we always had music in our house. Calvin had been playing the blues, and he was trying to get into the jazz thing and listening to Wes Montgomery and guys like that. And my mom was a jazz pianist, and she and Calvin would play together, and they gigged together and stuff. But they come over and woodshed together, so it was really cool. And I would see that. I guess I was probably in junior high school then, so I must have been about 12, 13.
So he was actually talking to Ronnie Beck here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Such an honor. So Calvin was older. He was older than you, and he was coming. And your mom had. Would she just be playing? Was she playing organ stuff, or was she playing just straight?
No. They were playing jazz piano. We had a piano in the house. And it would be her and Calvin. I guess they were learning chords and stuff and melodies to jazz standards, and that's what they would do. It would be just, again, it was like woodshedding. They were just kind of learning things together and sharing, the music.
This is what I'm, when I talked to Tootie Heath, I've done a couple interviews with Albert Tootie Heath, and what was kind of blew my mind was that in the early 50s, when he started his career, he was playing in R&B bands and blues before bebop. He didn't even it wasn't bebop first. It was R&B. And I want you, as best you can, to talk about this idea. I mean, even you said it with Calvin. He was playing blues and he wanted to learn jazz. He was trying to learn Wes Montgomery licks and that kind of stuff. But I wanted you to talk about how connected jazz is to the blues. It might seem self-explanatory, but when I go see jazz today, not you and Chester and Barry Finnerty playing quartet, organ jazz, but I'm talking like kids that are, straight out academia or they're on the bandstand. I hear a lot of technical proficiency. I hear a lot of odd-metered stuff, and I hear a lot of great facility, but I wind up staring at the wall because I don't feel the soul in it. And I feel like we've gotten too far away from the blues within jazz. And I wanted you to talk, so you can riff on that any way you want.
Yeah, I agree with that analogy, and it's true. A lot of the younger guys, and when you're young, it is about that. I used to be the exact same way. When you're young, it's about developing technique and what we call chops. You want to have chops. And what happens is, one of two things, and you continue to go about it playing that way, and you find yourself playing more of that style of music, more free music. Like I saw some young guys recently that all of them had amazing chops, man, and it was really good. But they understood the groove, and that's the difference, man, because the groove is rooted, blues is rooted in groove and feel. It's all about the feel, and it doesn't require a lot. You can have chops, but you have to discipline yourself and teach yourself how to just simplify what you're doing and play what's necessary for the music that's being played. And unfortunately, a lot of the younger cats and a lot of jazz cats, period, that are focused mostly on chops, forget about playing for the song or playing for whoever you're with. If you're playing with a blues guitar player, you're not going to be back there soloing and practice playing on your licks. You play what's required. So it's a discipline, an unspoken discipline and code among musicians whether it's jazz, blues, or whatever style of music is, you try to play for the style of music that you're playing. And the really good guys and the guys that excel at their craft know that. And that's why they get to play. And they can play jazz, they can play blues. But you're right, jazz is rooted in the blues. And all of the good jazz players do understand that, man. You got to know how to play a blues. Just like they'll say, can you play a ballad? One of the hardest things to play is a ballad. You got to play slow. You have to take all of those chops and slow them down and discipline them and turn it down and play simple. And it's just, that's part of really learning how to be a well-rounded musician, in my opinion.
I love I love that riff. Now, my follow-up would be, how much more authentic was it for you to learn that groove and feel by playing with the original masters of the blues? I mean, the reality is that music in our culture has a totally different meaning now. I mean, these cats that you were alongside, I mean, I don't want to keep talking about John Lee, but it could be anybody, Howlin' Wolf and, Muddy. These guys, they were singing their lives. They were really living the blues. And just the way John Lee saw you and said, what instrument you play? Come on up. So there was accessibility to the original masters of the music. So talking to younger peeps today, outside of just listening to records, how do you develop that feel? It's hard to play the blues when you're living in suburbia, you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's true. But like for me, I reference my upbringing in Omaha, man. There were kids from suburbia that would come to our house to learn that. And my mom was there, and she would kind of let us know when we were doing it right or wrong. So that was helpful, and the word got around it. Man, you can come over to their house, man, and you can find out what's going on. The other thing is, too, man, is like, for me, instead of disrespecting the guys you're playing with and overplaying, which is what people do, you just learn to do what's required. I also played with guys that if you didn't play what was necessary, you didn't get to play. So it was pretty simple. If you came up there soloing, man, you got chops, man, but I need you to give me the groove, man. Give me the backbeat. And I've heard people say, just give me the backbeat. And the guy that really taught me that was John Turk.
My man, let's just break it down. The guy, the Glide Memorial Master. Go ahead, riff on that. I love that cat.
This is before Glide Memorial. Now, we were playing in Oakland, downtown Oakland, and it was an R&B gig, and it was a 5-night-a-week gig, and it was packed every night, man. Chicks were hanging out. In fact, it was in the Superfly days when that stuff was happening.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, but it was all, and John Turk absolutely is all about the groove. I mean, guys with other musicians would come to see us play in the club, and that's how I met Bruce Conti from Tower of Power, and I got that gig through John Turk, man, playing with him in Oakland, and people were coming and checking out these cats, man. There's some dudes down there, man, in Oakland downtown, man, and they funking it up, man. We were, man. It was serious. John Turk, and I attribute him to teaching me the groove, the feel, the pocket is and they used to call it the lay too, man. You got to know how to lay, which means just laying it down and staying there.
This is why I love talking to you cats, man. Here's the thing. Now I want to be clear about the chronology here. Because when I talked to a couple cats, really the precursors of, there was no word in the musical lexicon for funk at that time. Funk didn't come along till like the late 60s, early 70s. Did you have a chance to see Johnny Talbot or play with him or those were the precursors to Sly Stone and those cats? Did you get to play with them at all?
I played with Johnny Talbot not in the 60s. I met Johnny in the 70s, and I've actually I think we did something together, not real recently, but later in life for both of us. We ran into each other and we were doing some stuff. Matter of fact, I did a recording with Johnny Talbot. It had to be, and then maybe in the 80s or 90s,
I gotta
something
look
like
this
that.
up. Are you
Yeah.
really? This is unbelievable. Can you talk? Yeah.
I don't think it ever got released. He had a song called Peanut Butter and Jelly, man. It was great. And we were at a fantasy studio in Berkeley, and we did Peanut Butter, man. It was great. Johnny Talbot is definitely one of the pioneers in the Bay Area, for sure.
If you were, because I just want to read you this quote from an interview I did with Marshall Jones. He said, John Turk would play organ and trumpet at the same time. He would play organ with one hand and play the trumpet with the other. He was still living in Vallejo
Right.
at the time. He was playing with Johnny Hartzman. I would play on some of their gigs.
Right.
Hartzman was on keyboards, organ, guitar, Turk on organ, keyboards, and trumpet. They would switch off playing bass pedals on the B3, depending on who was playing the organ. It was either Fred Casey or Ray Cotton would be the drummers. Now, I mean,
Right.
when you talk about having to lay or to to play that groove, I mean, Turk was. Can you just put me back in that time and how you guys like ultimately what John was doing in his playing that helped you learn those concepts, or as you explained, he was a teacher for you?
Well, what I found out with John is John plays. It's all about the feel and copping a groove. Because John is a groove master. I mean, we would take a song and we could play one song for 10 minutes.
I love it.
But it was like you play the same thing over and over again. And what I learned from cats like Clifford Coulter on the other side of that was a guy that did like to play a lot, and he had chops, and he wanted you to stretch out, and he wanted to hear the drums play a lot like what guys are doing now. Whereas with John, it was simple. We were playing at a club where people were dancing, and they didn't want to hear all of that. They wanted to hear something they could dance to. So that's what the motivation was behind that. I mean, the dance floor is practice. You got to keep them dancing. And I even learned how to take a drum solo and keep them dancing, which is hard to do, And it was all about the feel in the group because people were dancing. That was the key. Really, that was the real motivation behind playing simple like that.
What was it? Were you playing the Left Bank? What clubs were you playing at?
There was a place in Oakland called the Black Knight, which was right on Broadway and Piedmont. That was my first gig with John, man, and that was a great gig, man. That was a gig where it was packed 5 nights a week, man. We were tearing it up back then, and then we moved down the street to at the MacArthur Broadway Shopping Center, and there was a place called the Fox, and we just carried it on, man. 5 nights a week, man. Club was packed, chicks was hanging out. Players and pimps and stuff were hanging out, and it was great, man. And people came to drink and have fun and dance and listen to some good music, man. Musicians used to hang out there on their off nights. The good cats that were working a lot as well. And we'd go to each other's gigs, man. Gaylord Birch used to come to my gig. I'd go to his gig, and man, it was, and we all understood what was required. And John was definitely the groove master. I mean, cats are coming, and we had we used to call it the Turk Buck. He used to bump his head like a turkey.
The Turk bump.
All of the cats, the Turk. I can't. I don't know if that's exactly what we call it.
Yeah.
Everybody had, where he was bucking his head out like a turkey, and everybody, all the musicians were bumping their head on the backbeat, on the 2 and the 4, and yeah, man, if you found that groove when you were playing, and you got them heads bumping, you knew you were doing your job.
No, because I know Gaylord Birch had a gig at the Black Knight with Tommy Coster. That was around the time that you and Turk were down there. I mean, I guess it's also important. Like, I mean, were you playing? I mean, those were real gigs. I mean, you were getting paid 1 hour on, 1 hour off. Maybe you'd go check out somebody else's set. But I mean,
no, it was 4-hour gigs. It was 4 hours, 45 and 15, 45 minutes set, 15-minute break. That's what we did for 4 hours.
Unbelievable.
In those days. Yeah, it was great.
Did you
twice on Sunday?
Right. Well, my question was, did you, when the gig was over, were you? I know I already kind of know the answer, but were you going to the Fillmore District for the dawn sessions with Merle, Groove Holmes, and those cats?
No, man, we would go to Jack's, man. That would be the spot, man. We'd go to San Francisco to Jack's. And that was, especially on Sunday mornings from 6 to 10, they had a jam session back then. And that's where we were going to go hear some jazz. And there were a few clubs in San Francisco. But mostly, I had spent most of my time in Oakland. Even though I lived in San Jose, I would always spend most of my time in Oakland because Oakland was all about the funk, man. And that's my favorite style of music is funk, personally.
When did you first start hearing? I mean, people would say play a funky blues. I mean, going back to like the '60s, you say play something. Let's play a funky blues. But the word funk was not in the lexicon for a long time.
Well, before funk, they would call it a boogaloo, or they just man, give me a backbeat. They would ask for a backbeat. Man, we're gonna play a blues with a backbeat, a straight ahead backbeat, and then okay, that was gonna be a funky blues. Nowadays, they'll say play a funky blues, but I mean, as you said, and it's accurately so, that the word funk was not in our vocabulary yet, but it didn't take long for that word to get around, man. It only took about a couple of years, and everybody was talking about the funk. So, yeah.
This is phenomenal. So, I mean, would you say that, I mean, growing up, your mom, was she into cats like Elmo Hope and Ornette? Was she dropping bar lines? I guess what I'm trying to get at is this: like you play, that's you love funk, like the blues and that funk, but you have the ability to play free. I'm just trying to figure out. There was this in the early '60s. There was the most amazing stuff going on with call and response going on within melodic improvisation. Some people call it jazz. Late '50s, early '60s, and was your mom? Could you talk a little bit about some of the things that she passed on to you from a jazz point of view? Anything that comes to your mind that has aided you throughout your whole career, even if you're playing, simpler styles of music?
Well, my mom was also a singer, and she was more not the avant-garde or that kind of stuff. She wasn't really into that because she was a singer and a jazz pianist, and she was playing clubs for white people that wanted to hear jazz, because in the 60s it was jet setters and the whole thing, and everybody was drinking martinis and smoking cigarettes, so it was more, I hate the term smooth jazz. It wasn't smooth jazz, but it was more torch songs and straight ahead jazz. I mean, it wasn't a whole lot of avant-garde is what they called it in those days, dropping meter and doing weird stuff like that. I wasn't really exposed to a lot of that. I mean, I liked that when it was starting to come out, but it had a different flavor, man. It wasn't like Ornette Coleman and those guys. I listened to them, but I wasn't really playing that style. It was more piano trio type stuff, like the Three Sounds and singers like Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and Nina Simone. We were doing that type of jazz. It was the other thing that I'll say that my mom taught me that served me my whole life is she says, play for the singer. And most musicians in the rhythm section have a disdain for singers.
Really?
It's all about the singer. Yeah, because it's all about the singer.
Right.
When you got a singer up there, and he would come, even if they just came to sit in, and a lot of times that would be the case. You have a singer come sit in, and he take over the band, and like, okay, do this and do that, don't play too much. And you had to respect the singer, and because of that, cats are like, man, I'd rather hear a sax solo than a singer or a trumpet solo.
Right.
Because then you could loosen up and play more free. But mom taught me, pay attention to the singer, learn the songs, and I sing as well. And the myriad of singers that I've played with over my career have all appreciated the fact that I understood how to respect and follow the singer and support the singer, because the singer truly is, when they're singing, especially a good singer, they're the ones that's the focus when they're singing. It ain't about the bass player, the guitar player, the keyboard player, none of that. It's about that singer, and you should support and accompany them. And that, when you learn to do that, other singers like you, and more often than not, singers are guys that are booking gigs and stuff because they got their own reputation to keep. When you get calls, you get to work.
You got to sing for your supper, right? Yeah, I dig, man. This is they're already established, and you're going to get good gigs. I mean, I listened to Jimmy Cobb play with Sarah Vaughan on records. The supportive element of, let's just break it down. I mean, can you point to, like I know Calvin played with Frankie Edwards and Gadsden. They broke bread together. What was the gig early on in your career where your ears grew the most on the bandstand?
I'd have to say playing with John Turk, man. And my ears grew in an area that I really enjoyed because I like playing the groove. I like the lay. I like the pocket. I like the funk. That's just something I gravitated to naturally. I
Right.
started in jazz, but I never considered myself a real jazz drummer. I understand how to play jazz and what is required. But, there's certain styles of music that you just really like. And I really like, actually, it was organ funk is what it was, and they call it soul jazz now, but that's what we were doing. It would be an organ player, left-hand organ players kicking. Everybody says bass pedals. Organ players played bass with their left hand, and the bass would just accent, pedals would accent their left-hand bass. Not many cats actually ran a bass line on the bass pedals. There were guys that could do that, like Chester Thompson and Frank Evers and all those guys that you're talking about, but they didn't play pedals all the time. It was a left-hand bass. John Turk played left-hand bass. Clifford Coulter played left-hand bass. All of those guys, it was left-hand bass. Even Merle Sanders played left-hand bass, so he came in that organ trio thing, which would be organ, guitar, and drums. No bass player, organ bass.
I want to be okay. So, because you just it's just so funny because I know you probably haven't listened to my interview with Turk, but he said the same. I thought Turk was kicking pedals. I mean, I thought that was the point. No, he was playing left hand.
No.
Most cats don't. I always just assumed that Clifford and Turk and Chester were probably three of the only cats that were really truly kicking pedals. But your Turk was just playing left hand bass.
Well, like I said, they would use the pedals, and the only time that maybe they would actually really kick pedals on a song would be on a slow song, because they didn't have to move real fast. And there were cats like Chester could play fast bass lines and intricate bass lines on the pedals, and on occasion he would do that. But primarily it was a left-hand bass, and then the pedals would just kind of, they would call it popping the pedals, just to give it some percussiveness to the actual bass sound, because the bass sound on the organ doesn't have a lot of attack. So they would pop the pedals to give it that attack. And the bass drum would actually sometimes give the attack to the bass on the organ. So it was a different thing. I mean, it was a different sound, man. It was and a different feel. It's organ versus bass, an actual bass player is two different animals, really. Similar stuff, but they are different and unique.
No, I mean, this is important because a lot, like cats like Mike Clark, he'll make statements, and I want to get your opinion on it. He'll say, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially, my generation and younger, they come up playing music, like funk music, right? But they don't have the background, like we talked about, the blues and jazz background. So therefore, they're lacking in feel, and they're lacking in going back far enough in the music. And I wanted you to talk about the idea. You said I can play jazz. It's not really my passion. I don't want to say passion, but it's not your main drive. I mean, you love playing funk, but how much of having that foundation, the rudiments of jazz and blues, allows you to play elastically in a funk setting, make it swing harder than just if you started playing funk. You know, my generation, they may only go back to Boogaloo, like Idris Muhammad or Bernard Purdie. They don't go back any farther than that to the Papa Joe Joneses and the Philly Joe Joneses and the cats that were, whatever, even the guys that played behind singers. I'd like you to talk about how those rudiments helped you become a more authentic, funky player.
Well, you say authentic, I would say versatile.
Versatile.
The further back you go, you learn those different styles and how guys played the music then, and you want to understand how to play authentically those other styles and older styles of music. And the guys that don't go that far back for whatever reason, they just gravitate to music that suits their style and their taste and what they like to play. Everybody doesn't really want to be real versatile drummer, and that comes from just gigging, man. On a gig, you may play anything from James Brown to Sarah Vaughan on a gig, and if you don't understand how to play all of that and in between, then you end up doing what you know how to do, and it's sometimes successfully and more than not unsuccessfully because you haven't played it, like going and playing a country gig. If you never played country music before, the real country aficionados know that you ain't never played that style before, and they'll tolerate it sometimes, but it's best to really learn how to play. Same with Latin music, man. If you're gonna play that style of music, you gotta learn the history of that style of music. There's a real players for each genre knows it. Like most guys think blues is really simple, man. Blues is way more sophisticated than most people realize. And I learned that, I'd have to say, in the late 80s, early 90s is when I was kind of really learned how sophisticated blues can be. And I went back and started listening to those old songs, man. Muddy Waters, Lightning Slim Hopkins, and all those guys, man. The drummers were doing some really cool stuff, man. So it wasn't what blues has become today, man. You hear blues now, man. And it's sometimes you hear some guys that really know the blues, and it just a lot of times it's not. The same with jazz, man. There's guys that learn certain things in jazz, especially the guys that learn jazz in the conservatories at school. I mean, they're very knowledgeable about certain things, and they've done in history. But what they miss out on is actual practical application, which is playing it, and out of school. I mean, in school, man, you play and you're playing for a bunch of students, so you're going to get responses to what you're doing that are a little bit exaggerated from real life because you're around a bunch of people that are going through the same thing that you're going through. But if you're in a real life setting at a club somewhere in San Francisco, New York, LA, Chicago, any of those cities where there's some real players, they're going to look at you and say, okay, does he know what he's doing? Has he really been around? And that's how you get your experience, man. A kid straight out of school, man, yeah, they got academia and they understand what they've learned there, and that's great. But now you got to really learn how to play. School is about technique and knowledge. The practical application is real life experience, getting out there, playing with older cats, younger cats, especially playing with the older cats, because the older cats are steeped in the history. And that's what you got to get, and it gives you depth, and it adds depth to your playing by understanding that stuff.
Talking to Ronnie Beck here on the Jake Feinberg Show. I my generation and younger, I mean, we are intergenerational here. What were you hearing from who were these drummers? Was it Sam Lay and those cats, or I'd like you to talk specifically, because even when I listen to the stuff on Chess, the blues records, I've talked to Bobby Spencer, and I've talked to David Garibaldi, Paul Jack, a thousand cats. Now I get a chance to talk to you. And they all say the adherence of the younger generation to the complexity of the blues is not there. So could you talk about some of the patterns they were doing that were complex when you started getting off on that in the late 80s, early 90s?
Well, it's not a complexity. It requires discipline is what it is, man, because once you develop chops, you develop chops so you can play anything. But then it takes a discipline and a respect for the music, the style of music you're playing, to discipline how you play. It doesn't have to be something real complicated, but there's a sophistication to it. I mean, there were things, because guys that really were all about that style of music, and you keep mentioning blues, the real serious blues drummers, they had chops, man, and most people don't realize those that have not dug deep enough and really listened enough to that style of music don't understand that. They just kind of cursorily listen to it. Oh, okay, it's a backbeat or a backbeat here, or do this, do that. It's something really simple, but it's way more to it than that. But it takes having to play that style of music for a living, so you have to learn it and do it to keep the people you're playing with happy. And it's more of a discipline. It really is, man. It's just about playing what's required. And most young cats, because they got chops and they want to show them off, it's boring just to sit there and play a simple beat through a whole song. You want to play a bunch of stuff and have fun, and that's cool. But in some ways, it's disrespectful to the people you're playing with, unless you're playing with a bunch of young guys that think the same way you do. But if you're 17 and you're playing with a Cat 45, you could get your ass kicked if you didn't play what he wants you to play, and that happened to me. Now, dude, you have to learn to discipline what you're doing. I love your chops, man. We're going to give you a drum solo later in the set, but right now, I don't need you playing a drum solo while I'm taking my sax solo.
Right. Right. There's a busyness there. I would contend that that younger cats coming out of academia have such little opportunity to play on the bandstand that they need to they're so busy on the kit because they have to get stuff out of their system because they have anxiety because they're not going to play. They don't know the next time they're going to get a gig. That's the problem. You guys were.
It's one of the problems, but it's not the problem. The real problem is playing with different people. That's how you really learn how to play.
That's true. That's right.
That's what it's about. When you're in school, you're playing with a bunch of students, so you're playing with people that think like you and are approaching the music the same way you are. You're trying to learn the music, and you're young. So everybody's got the same idea, and you play what's working there. And there's a lot of groups that come from that. So the music has evolved now to suit temperament. Based on how you want to play, you can find some cats that want to play the way you want to play, and you get together and play, and so a lot of times they become successful doing it. And that's just how the music has evolved. Years ago, it was only a jazz gig, or it was only a blues gig available. But now they're starting to become more venues and available, and people coming to see younger players playing all kind of stuff. I mean, all of them are just ridiculous, but people like it. So there's an audience for it now. I saw a group, Extra Nappy, man. Those cats were ridiculous, man. Howard Wiley and Thomas Pridgeon and those guys, man. Jake, it was ridiculous. And I was at the club, man, down in San Jose at Cafe Stritch, man, and there were a bunch of young kids, hipsters, and millennials there, man, and they were all over it. This girl leans over to me and says, "Oh, man, it's so organized what they're doing, man. They're just so passionate." And I said, "Girl, they freestyling," and that's exactly what they were doing. They would play a riff, and then whatever that riff was, that would be whatever they played for the next 3 or 4 minutes based on that riff. And they were all playing just freestyling, and that's a great word, freestyling, which is a more modern term, freestyling and ad-libbing, but together. And they understood how to think and listen on a sophisticated level to understand what to do, and it worked, man. It really worked. It blew me away. I was really excited to see those guys.
Tell me the name of the band again. What was the name of the group?
Extra Nappy.
Extra Nappy. I'll have to. So yeah, no, that's the cosmic thing is, man, when you play after you play the head of the tune, if you're all on the same page, you can go off into space together, and if you do it well, it's the most cosmic thing in the world, man.
It's absolutely, man. Those kids were going crazy, man. They were dancing, they were bouncing in their seats, man. And it was very high energy, too.
That's so good. Nobody looking at their phones. They're just straight ahead, man.
No, they put the phones down, and they were still texting and stuff. They probably texting back and forth to each other because it was loud and you couldn't talk, so you text back and forth to each other. Man, this is great. Yeah, man, these guys are kicking ass, man. Yeah, that's the shit. Yeah. And it was.
We have a
and I respect that, man.
Oh, I dig. It's good. No, I mean it's cathartic, and it's the seeds have been planted long ago. We have a game on this program called Name That Tune. I'm going to put this in for you, and then we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
All right. Do you want me to name it now?
Let's just groove on it for a minute.
Yeah.
And literally the computer decided to restart during the jam, so that we lost.
Yeah, that's all right.
Hey man, so you know what that is?
Absolutely, it's Baco.
Vaco, man, and that to me is also one of the, we talked about, we've been identifying positives and things that are, vexing in this time. But I mean, the idea of having free form radio and the idea that you have somebody like Vaco who comes along and says, I'm going to cut an album with Blue Thumb and I'm going to put all these cats that, I mean, you're featured with John Lee on that album, and you're featured with Clifford Coulter, and there's Middle Eastern music on there, and it's all Oakland Bay Area regional music, and that was pressed on records, and it created an identity not just for the leaders, but it created an identity for Ron E. Beck. That's how you got on my radar to begin with. So you don't have a record industry. We don't have a record industry anymore, and people can say, yeah, you can do everything on your own. That's great. There's just a saturation of material out there. And
absolutely.
And so it's really hard to break through that morass. But could you just talk about that style that you were playing? Because to me, like, you played some fills, and then all of a sudden you were playing really straight ahead. I mean, but it was just jagged. Everything about Clifford's music just seems to be jagged. It's just, I'd love you to talk about how even that tune was entitled Vaco, but I have a feeling that there were no charts for that tune. I could be wrong.
No, it was just a head arrangement. Clifford wrote the song and taught John the trumpet melody. Clifford was playing the organ on that, kicking the left-hand bass. I think Clifford was playing guitar on that song too, and
Turk.
Clifford was also playing a melodic. Yeah, John Turk was playing the trumpet on that, and then Clifford was playing a melodica along with the trumpet on the melody on that.
Oh my!
And it was a song that Clifford wrote. And we just learned the song. Yeah, Clifford's listen. You listen to the melody. And that's trumpet and melodia playing the melody. And that was like a little handheld keyboard that you blew into. And Clifford used to play that back in the day. So, yeah. That was good. But that song, no, let me say this, though, Jake. That song kind of goes back from a halftime funk thing, and then it would go to straight time, and it would become a shuffle. So it was a combination of jazz, blues, and funk, all three of those.
Exactly.
In that song.
That's what I'm hearing. And it took me a minute to get my ear around it when I first listened to it. Obviously, playing it with you, I get amped up about it. But it's that blending and doing it in a way that is, well, you're playing the song. And that, I mean, when you went to, that was kind of my question, is that, we touched on Ornette and those cats. But did you play with Rudolph Johnson and those cats? Because those dudes... Dewey Redmond, I mean, those guys were searching for new sonic boundaries, and I just figured that Ronnie Beck was definitely involved in stretching that musical vocabulary. It may not have been your favorite thing to play, but Jackson Sutter used to be Herschel Davis, Chester, and Rudy. But I figured, what were the cats that you played with when, the freest jazz you played in?
Wow. Actually, I have to say that I was a teenager then. The most free jazz that I played, because we were doing Larry Young and Big John Patton, and doing, Jimmy Smith was hot then. We were doing a little bit of Jimmy Smith, Larry Young stuff. We were doing a little bit of the more obscure and more free organ jazz. Soul jazz,
wow,
what they call it now. That's the era I came up in, man. We were doing that kind of stuff. And the reason we liked it is because it was a break from bebop, which was big in the 40s and the 50s, but in the 60s, man, they started to put, as you call it, the backbeat into the jazz, and it was working. But it was not just the backbeat, it was with sophistication and improvisation in between backbeat. But you'd hit the backbeat just to lock it down. And when required, people could dance to it if they needed to. So it was an attempt to keep working, man. If people want to dance, you got to give them something they can dance to. And if you like to play jazz, you learn how to play jazz with a backbeat, and they liked it. People would still continue to dance and would come to see it, and it worked, man. It was a transition and an evolution of those three styles of music: blues, jazz, and R&B, rhythm and blues. Yeah,
The
that's what that was about.
Yeah, no, because like you're talking about like Larry Young, like Unity with Joe Henderson, Woody Shaw, and like Elvin. Like Elvin's were you influenced by Elvin? And if so, like, because he was.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Elvin, Tony Williams. Actually, my first favorite drummer was Max Roach. So it went from Max Roach, and then it went to Elvin, then it went to Tony Williams, man. And then I was like, Tony was the epitome, man. He took drums, brought them to the forefront, man. He really did, in my opinion. And Elvin too, but that was more straight ahead jazz when he was playing with Coltrane and cats like that, and Miles and what they were doing, you know. But again, it was just an infusion, jazz with an infusion of R&B, man, giving it that backbeat and giving it a kind of a funk feel, but it was jazz.
I dig. No, I dig. And you know, at the end of the day, your generation, you come from this generation where you got to be able to tap your foot, you got to be able to dance, and I'm wondering if you think that jazz became jazz itself, starting in the early '70s. After that boogaloo, soul jazz, acid jazz period that we've chronicled, if jazz became an inside joke for musicians, where it got too complex, people didn't understand it, they couldn't follow the song, and therefore it lost a lot. I mean, Art Blakey's famous line is, you know, my job is to wash away the dust of everyday life for the peeps that come in to see my show. And it seemed to me that it was a switch. It went in. It was about complexity, and it got too out. And I'm just curious if you think that hurt jazz in a way where today it's not even close to the most popular music in this country where it used to be.
Well, you could say it got too sophisticated or too complicated, but to me, I'm happy that all of that happened because you can reference that and you can take from that. But that's what's happening now, man. All of the stuff that we're hearing now is just a combination of all the things that have happened before. You know, whether it's outside, inside, upside, downside, left side, right side. It's all music, and it's just how you interpret it and how you put it together. And if you get like-minded people getting together and doing something, and if people can relate to it, then you're on it. It's the whole motivation behind any of the music was that it was popular and people you could work, man. It was all about that. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's talking about a jazz kit of drums. Well, he said, man, there was no jazz kit of drums. He said, it was about you bring a small set of drums to the gig because you didn't have to carry a bunch of stuff. And then all of a sudden everybody calls it a jazz kit. Well, it was a smaller kit because it was easier to haul around and you work more, man. You can get to this gig and that gig in more efficient amount of time. You had less stuff to carry. So that was the real motivation behind it. And more often than not, it is simple stuff that motivates different changes in music, man. There are people that intellectualize the music and really want to get sophisticated. Like Rudolph Johnson was one of those guys. He really studied the music and studied theory and all of those different things. And there were guys like that. McCoy Tyner's like that. You know, they really study the music, and they are all about the sophistication and what just exploring. Basically, is what they were doing, was exploring and trying to find different ways to play the music, man. Because you only got 12 notes. How many different ways can you play 12 notes?
And you got to learn to play. Yeah, and like as Tootie told me, you got to learn to play in before you can play out. You know, and I think that's
true.
You know, I mean, if you start out, it's going to be hard to play in or be adherent to those simpler but yet disciplined forms like blues and this stuff.
Well, it goes even more base than that. If you go and you don't learn how to play in, and you don't know how to play, you don't know how to play in, and you only can play out, you're not going to work a lot.
Well, that's
you want to work, be a working musician, you got to learn to do what's required for the gig.
Before I let you go, and I thank you so much for taking the time, what can you just talk about a couple of gigs you got coming up on your schedule?
Actually, yes, I can. I got a gig this evening. It's going to be here in San Jose at the Evergreen Village Square with my band. We're playing from 6:30 to 8:30. And then I have there's a lot of gigs on the calendar. My band, different bands, and one gig that I'm really excited about is I'm taking my band back to Omaha. They have a really big festival there. It's called Jazz on the Green. There's Jazz on the Greens in a bunch of cities, but theirs is huge, man. There's like anywhere from 8 to 10,000 people at Jazz on the Green in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. And we're going back there. That's going to be on August 3rd when we're doing that. So anybody in Omaha, you heard it here. But yeah, I'm all over the place. We're going to be at Yoshi's with another group I play with called Tortilla Soup. It's kind of a Latin-based and old school R&B band, a good band. We're playing Yoshi's in September.
What can I ask you, in your band, what's the instrumentation and the point of view of the band?
Our band is a bass, 2 guitars, keyboards, drums, and I have another drummer that allows me that plays when I go out front and sing. I'll play from the drums, and when I want to just go out front, he plays drums and sings. I also have a female vocalist with me as well. She sings background.
Wait, hold on. You were so back in the day, you were singing and playing traps at the same time. Is that true?
Yeah, always, yeah.
Like with Clifford or Mel Brown and those guys, like you'd be singing and playing?
Not so much with Mel, because when we played with Mel, it was about Mel, man. Mel is incredible. I love Mel Brown.
Can you just tell me a good Mel? Talk about Mel Brown before we wrap, because that dude he was such a street scholar and such an unbelievable player, and still to this day, light years ahead of anything going on.
Well, he was actually an example of, a blues cat that had chops. You know, a lot of blues cats don't really play fast and stuff, and Mel was the exact opposite, man. He could play as fast as you wanted to play and play the blues, play with feeling and all that, and he was a great guy. And Clifford and Mel were really close. That's how I got to meet Mel, was through Clifford. They were doing stuff with B.B. King in those days, man. They'd go to L.A. and do sessions and stuff with B.B., and Mel would be on some of those sessions. And then it was also, at that time, it was Impulse Records, where they were doing this kind of cool jazzy stuff that had funk and blues mixed in it, so they were kind of about that. And who else? It was Blue Thumb Records, because Ibaka was actually on Blue Thumb.
No, you're right. I mean, I just found this obscure Oliver Nelson record on Impulse, big band, and there's Mel Brown on guitar. This is back.
Mel was doing. Yeah, well, Mel was down in L.A., man, and he was one of the guys a lot of people would call, man, because they loved his style of playing, because he was a perfect example of a mixture of blues and jazz, man, because he had the chops of a jazz player and the feel and temperament of a blues player.
Right. I dig.
And cats like Larry Carlton are right in that same school, man, and Larry Carlton's like that, man. You can hear the guys that are jazz players that understand the blues, man. There's a difference to how they play, man. It's not always about chops and speed and playing real flashy. I mean, they can take it down to the bottom and just give you some real simple bluesy stuff, man, but it was having a sophistication to it because of their knowledge musically beyond that of just a blues player, man. That's why it's good to know both, man. Blues and jazz, man. It's very important because it's all music, but what makes it blues so important is that it's about the feel, and that's the part that because jazz, a lot of times people think it's from your head, but it's from your heart too, and the feel is from the heart. You know, it's not about how sophisticated it is, about how it feels, man. If it feels good, even if it's fast or slow, it has a feel to it, and blues is what dictates that.
That's right. When I listen to Larry Carlton play on some of those Crusaders records after they dropped the jazz Crusaders, you can hear it's the feel. It's where he puts it's where he puts the notes, it's the time, it's the space. It's like it feels so good. Mel was the same way, and that's really that in this day and age when you can get everything down through the efficiency model to the 0.001 percentile. We're so hung up on perfection and quantifying things that you strip out all the feel, you squeeze all the juice out of it, and what do you get? You get sterility. You get formulaic stuff. And that's really what my show is.
It's basically head or your heart. I mean, feel is from the heart, and sophistication and stuff is intellectual. It's from your brain, and it's when you can take it from your head to your heart, you got it down. That's what it takes.
Ronnie Beck, man, get some rest for the gig tonight. We'll be in touch. Maybe we can do part 2 down the road. It was great to connect with you, man.
Absolutely. Let's do it again.
All right, baby. Be good. Have a good time. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Jake.
Later on, dude.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.